In 2008, when a mother killed her own 12-year-old daughter.
She wasn't kidnapped. She wasn't lost. Her own mother strangled her, then stood in front of cameras, crying, begging the world to help. This is the chilling story of Penny Bordeaux and the daughter she murdered to keep a man. She was 12 years old, a quiet, sweet girl with blue eyes, a shy smile, and a journal full of innocent frustration. Carissa Bordeaux trusted the world, and more than anyone, she trusted her mother. That trust cost her everything. This isn't a story about a runaway. It's not about a stranger in the dark. It's about a mother, a woman who looked her child in the eyes and chose a man over motherhood. A woman who staged a tearful press conference while her daughter's body lay cold in the snow. A woman who weaponized sympathy and fooled an entire town. Her name is Penny Bordeaux, and this is the story of how she strangled her only child, then begged the world to help her find the girl she had already murdered. For weeks, Bridgewater, Nova Scotia became a town united in heartbreak. Neighbors searched icy forests, volunteers lit candles, and news anchors pleaded for information. All while the killer stood in front of the cameras, sobbing, lying, and performing. But the truth has a way of clawing to the surface. What started as a missing persons case became a web of lies, betrayal, and an undercover sting operation that forced a killer to confess. This is the story of how love, when twisted and deranged, can become fatal. It's about the danger hiding in plain sight, behind soft voices, tear-streaked cheeks, and hollow promises. This is the daily true story, the murder of Carissa Bordeaux. Before we begin, please like the video, tap that subscribe button, and leave your thoughts in the comments, because the world needs to remember who Carissa was and what her mother did. Now, let's go back to the beginning. In the dark of a Canadian winter, on a lonely roadside in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, 12-year-old Carissa Bordeaux uttered two words that should have stopped any parent cold. "Mommy, don't." But for Penny Bordeaux, those words weren't a cry for help. They were an inconvenience, a last-ditch plea from a daughter who had no idea that her mother, the woman meant to love and protect her, had already decided her fate. That moment, the tightening of the rope, the final gasp of breath, is the line between humanity and horror. And Penny crossed it. Carissa trusted her mother. Despite the drama, the tension, and the constant fighting about Penny's new boyfriend, Vernon, she still believed deep down that her mother loved her. But Penny wasn't just arguing with Carissa anymore. She was erasing her for love, for a man who didn't want to be around a child who didn't like him. This wasn't a sudden snap. Penny had time to plan, to think, to stop. She drove her daughter around for hours. She called her boyfriend to lay the groundwork for a lie. She pulled her child out of the car and she killed her. Slowly, deliberately. And when Carissa begged her to stop, when she said, "Mommy, don't," Penny only squeezed tighter. That moment defines everything that follows. The press conferences, the lies, the staged grief. All of it was a performance to cover up the fact that Penny Bordeaux heard her own daughter beg for her life and chose not to listen. What do you do when your child hates your partner? For most parents, the answer is simple: protect the child. But Penny Bordeaux wasn't like most parents. Faced with a daughter who couldn't stand her boyfriend, she didn't pick her child. She didn't send Carissa to live with her father. She didn't choose peace or compromise. She chose Vernon. The arguments were constant. Carissa's diary tells the story in heartbreaking detail. I'm mad because my mom is engaged to Vernon. The end. My life is ruined. It's the kind of raw, unfiltered pain only a child can write. Honest, unguarded, and desperate. And Penny read that pain. She lived in that tension, and instead of easing it, she let it fester. Vernon, according to Penny, gave her an ultimatum. It's me or her. Whether that's true or not, Penny believed it. And to her, the answer was obvious. Carissa was a problem. Vernon was the prize. So she made her choice. One that would destroy a family, devastate a community, and leave a 12-year-old girl dead. Penny could have walked away. She could have let Carissa move in with her father. But she didn't. Because in Penny's world, love was conditional, selfish, and violent. And no one, not even her own daughter, was allowed to get in the way. Carissa Bordeaux didn't scream for help in public. She didn't raise alarms or lash out at school. But she did write. Her diary became the only place she could be honest, a sacred space where a 12-year-old poured her soul onto the page. I don't like Vernon living with us. Mom made me move here. My life is ruined. These weren't tantrums. They were cries for help, and no one listened. Her words were silent warnings, signs that something was terribly wrong inside that cramped apartment in Bridgewater. Her mother's obsession with Vernon was smothering her. She didn't feel safe, she didn't feel loved, and she didn't have a voice. While Penny was building a fantasy future with her boyfriend, Carissa was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Every entry in that diary was a countdown, a record of neglect and eventually betrayal. The most chilling part? Carissa never imagined that her mother's coldness would turn deadly. Even in her worst moments, she didn't think Penny would kill her. Hurt her maybe. Ignore her certainly. But murder her? That was beyond comprehension. And yet, that's exactly what happened. Her diary wasn't just a journal. It was a map to the truth. If someone, anyone, had taken the time to really read it, maybe Carissa would still be alive. When Penny Bordeaux called the police to report her daughter missing, she said Carissa had disappeared from a mall parking lot. But there was one glaring detail that didn't make sense. She waited 3 hours to call. 3 hours. That's a lifetime when your child is missing. Most parents would scream, panic, collapse. Penny claimed she calmly searched the mall, walked around and checked a few stores. But she wasn't panicked. She wasn't frantic. Because she already knew Carissa wasn't coming back. Those 3 hours were never about searching. They were about staging. Penny needed to create a story, a timeline that looked real, and she used every minute of those 3 hours to construct a lie that would hold up under scrutiny. When the cameras turned on, she was ready. The grieving mother, the trembling voice, the desperate pleas. But behind it all was a woman who had already killed her child and dumped her body. Those 3 hours were everything. In that gap, she transformed herself from murderer to victim. She rehearsed her lines. She dried her tears. And when she finally picked up the phone to call the police, it was already too late for Carissa. Bridgewater was a small, tight-knit town. The kind where everyone knows everyone. And when a child goes missing, the whole community shows up. When Penny gave her tearful press conferences, neighbors believed her. When she passed out flyers and hugged volunteers, they embraced her. No one suspected the grieving mother standing in front of them was actually the killer. So they searched. They combed the frozen woods, dredged icy rivers, and knocked on doors. They didn't know they were chasing a ghost. The truth is, Penny never expected the town to care this much. But they did. They mobilized. They dropped everything. And Penny, she leaned into it. Her tears came on cue. Her voice cracked at just the right moments. She named every family member as searching, including Vernon, the same man Carissa hated, the same man she died over. Every night, Penny went home from those search parties and laid in bed knowing exactly where Carissa was. Every hug she received, every prayer whispered for her, was stolen. And the people of Bridgewater didn't just grieve when the truth came out. They felt betrayed because they had searched with the killer. They had been used. On February 9th, a man walking along the LaHave River saw something that shouldn't have been there. Carissa Bordeaux's body, frozen, disturbed, and discarded like trash. The search was over. The autopsy revealed the horror. Carissa had been strangled, no signs of sexual assault, but her clothing had been tampered with, jeans and underwear pulled down. It was a staged scene meant to mislead. Someone wanted this to look like a different kind of crime, but they left too many clues. Bridgewater was gutted, all hope shattered. The reality hit hard. Carissa hadn't run away. She hadn't gotten lost. She had been murdered. And her killer had joined the search. The discovery of Carissa's body changed everything. Investigators shifted gears. This was no longer a missing person case. It was a homicide. And the killer wasn't a stranger. Carissa knew them, trusted them. And that meant the circle of suspects got very, very small. Underneath the ice, the river had hidden the truth for 13 days. But when it gave up Carissa's body, it also cracked open the illusion Penny Bordeaux had spent weeks building. Her time as a grieving mother was running out. The truth was about to surface, and it was colder than the river itself. 2 days after Carissa's disappearance, the eyes of an entire nation fell on a tearful Penny Bordeaux standing before flashing cameras. Dressed in black, voices trembling, eyes wet with carefully timed tears, she delivered a plea that would echo across Canada. "We all love you. We all love Carissa. Just come home." Her grief looked raw, her pain palpable. Behind her stood Carissa's father, Paul, silent, supportive, shattered. Every word Penny spoke felt authentic. Reporters were moved. Viewers sobbed. Volunteers flooded in. The nation believed her. But behind the scenes, detectives were growing uneasy. Why was she so prepared? Why was she organizing press interviews while search teams still combed the rivers? Her insistence on speaking publicly, not once but twice in the span of days, was unusual. Most grieving parents are too distraught. Penny was front and center, dictating the emotional tone. And something else felt off. Her tears turned off just as easily as they turned on. Between camera takes, her demeanor changed. Composed, controlled, observant, as if she were studying reactions. For weeks, Penny would remain the grieving mother. She wept at candlelight vigils, she clutched missing posters. But behind those staged moments was a woman who already knew where her daughter was. She knew because she had put her there. On February 9th, everything changed. A man walking along the frozen banks of the LaHave River spotted something that didn't belong. It was the small, lifeless body of 12-year-old Carissa Bordeaux, the child the entire province had searched for, finally found. but the condition of her body would shatter any lingering hope that this had been a tragic accident. Carissa had been strangled. There were no signs of sexual assault, but her pants and underwear had been pulled down in what appeared to be a deliberate attempt to mislead investigators. It was a staged crime scene. Someone had tried to suggest something more sinister to confuse detectives to buy time. This wasn't a random predator. This was someone cold, calculating, someone who knew her. The entire town of Bridgewater fell into mourning. Schools held vigils, teachers cried in front of classrooms, parents clung to their children a little tighter. But as grief washed over the community, suspicion started to rise. Who could do this to a child? And why would someone try to stage the scene? Penny once again appeared before cameras, this time pleading for answers. But investigators were already looking at her through a different lens, because the killer hadn't just taken Carissa's life, they had taken something sacred, and now the mask was beginning to slip. After Carissa's body was found, the whispers grew louder. People who once defended Penny started noticing things. The 3-hour delay in calling the police, the inconsistencies in her timeline, how she kept inserting Vernon, her boyfriend, into press statements. And then came the fights. Neighbors at Penny's apartment reported violent arguments between her and Vernon, shouting matches, slamming doors. It didn't sound like two grieving people comforting each other. It sounded like panic, guilt, secrets unraveling under pressure. Why were they fighting so viciously just days after Carissa's murder? Detectives noticed something too. Penny had gone quiet. The press appearances stopped, the dramatic pleas vanished. She wasn't organizing searches anymore. She was withdrawing. Behind closed doors, investigators made a decision. This wasn't a random crime. It was personal. Carissa had known her killer, and now suspicion zeroed in on the people closest to her, Penny and Vernon. But how do you get someone to confess to murdering their own child? You build a trap. Police launched an undercover operation unlike anything the province had seen. Officers posing as criminals, fake crime bosses, a web of deception designed to draw out the truth. And they wouldn't have to wait long. It was Vernon who broke first. Undercover officers posing as gangsters approached him with an offer. They could make evidence disappear. Vernon, thinking he was finally among trusted criminals, started talking. What he revealed was a bombshell. He didn't kill Carissa, but he suspected Penny did. The statement shifted the entire investigation. Up until now, both had been suspects. But Vernon's quiet admission, even if self-serving, gave police a new direction. Penny had orchestrated the story. Penny had waited 3 hours. Penny had pushed the public grieving narrative. Now, Vernon was pointing the finger at her. But police couldn't arrest Penny based on his suspicions alone. They needed her own words, a confession, something solid. And they had an idea. More undercover officers approached Penny, this time posing as elite criminals who could erase any trace of the murder. All they needed? The truth. And in exchange, she'd never see a courtroom. Penny took the bait. What she said next would horrify even seasoned investigators, because not only did she admit to the murder, she acted it out with laughter, with detail, as if it was a performance. As if it wasn't her child she had strangled, but just a minor inconvenience. Penny didn't hold back. She described every detail to the undercover mobsters. How she'd driven Carissa to a remote road. How she'd lied to Vernon in a phone call, saying Carissa was missing, while the girls sat beside her, very much alive. And then how she got out of the car, pulled Carissa out and tackled her to the ground. She'd brought twine. She had prepared for this. Carissa struggled. She begged. "Mommy, don't," she cried. But Penny didn't stop. She tightened the twine around her daughter's neck and held it until the child went limp, until the fight was gone. Until Carissa, the daughter she raised, the girl she once held as a baby, was dead. Then Penny loaded her body into the trunk like trash. She drove for hours, unsure where to dump the evidence. Eventually, she chose the LaHave River, but not before staging the body to confuse the police, a twisted attempt to make it seem like something else. She then threw Carissa's clothes into a separate location to muddy the trail further. Investigators listening to her confession were stunned, not just by the crime, but by the coldness, the ease, the complete lack of remorse. Penny didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She laughed. She bragged. And in that moment, they knew they weren't dealing with a desperate mother. They were dealing with a monster. On June 14th, Penny Boudreaux was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The woman who'd stood before the nation crying for her missing daughter was now in handcuffs, and the town that had once embraced her in grief turned on her with fury. In court, Penny broke down, not because she was sorry, but because the game was over. She cried as the charges were read, but no one in the courtroom believed those tears anymore. She eventually pled guilty to second-degree murder, sparing the town a trial, but offering no true explanation. Her reason? Vernon had given her an ultimatum, him or Carissa. She chose him. The judge's words were scathing. "You can never call yourself a mother. Life in prison, no chance of parole for 20 years. Carissa's father, Paul, delivered a heartbreaking victim impact statement. He blames himself for letting Carissa return to Penny's care. He spoke about a bond that could never be broken and a grief that would never fade. Outside the courtroom, people screamed "child killer" as Penny was taken away. But the damage was already done. Carissa was gone, and nothing, not justice, not prison, not time, could ever bring her back. After Penny Boudreaux was sentenced, Bridgewater was left with a wound that refused to heal. The town that had once come together to search for a missing girl now carried the shame of having been manipulated by her killer. Storefronts that had once displayed missing posters now held memorial candles. School bulletin boards were replaced with grief counselors. Carissa's classmates left messages on her locker, notes folded into corners like secrets they never got to share. The innocence of the entire community had been shattered. Paul Boudreaux tried to pick up the pieces. He buried his daughter, then tried to bury his rage. But it kept resurfacing, in dreams, in silence, in every empty chair at every holiday dinner. He blamed himself for letting Carissa return to her mother. He replayed every conversation, every ignored instinct. And what haunted him most was how close Carissa had come to escaping that fate, how easily she could have stayed with him instead. Penny's name became poison. Even in prison, she managed to inflict pain. Vernon's life unraveled too. Though he hadn't committed the murder, his connection to the crime followed him like a shadow. People crossed the street to avoid him. He turned to drinking. He spiraled. Carissa was gone, and everyone left behind was fractured in her wake. If you thought the story ended with Penny behind bars, think again. 17 years later, Penny Boudreaux is in her 50s, and she's already trying to get out. Despite being ineligible for parole until 2028, she's pushing for unescorted day passes, a form of freedom testing meant to prepare inmates for reintegration. Yes, you heard that right. The woman who strangled her own daughter and dumped her body like trash believes she deserves a second chance, and she isn't shy about it. Penny argues she's changed, that she's remorseful, that she's ready to rejoin society. But the officials reviewing her case have serious concerns. Clinical reports warn that Penny Bordeaux may still pose a risk, especially if she perceives someone as standing in the way of her romantic relationships. Sound familiar? It should terrify you, because that's the exact same mindset that got Carissa killed. Penny didn't just make a mistake. She planned a murder. She staged a crime scene. She manipulated an entire town. And now, she wants to walk free. Paul and others have spoken out, demanding that Penny remain behind bars, that justice be more than just a 20-year sentence. Because Carissa doesn't get to grow up. She doesn't get parole. So why should Penny? Carissa Bordeaux should be 27 years old today. She should be living her life, graduating, falling in love, maybe starting a family of her own. Instead, her memory lives only in photographs, in diary pages, in the hearts of those who loved her. What Penny Bordeaux took wasn't just a child. She stole a future, a generation, a life that could have changed the world in small, beautiful ways. Carissa's story became a turning point in how authorities handle missing child cases. The Bridgewater police, still haunted by how close Penny came to escaping justice, now approach every disappearance with sharper eyes and deeper skepticism. Her case is used in training seminars, a reminder that the most dangerous person in a child's life might be the one who shares their last name. But more than that, Carissa's story is a warning, a plea to listen to children when they speak up, to trust their discomfort, to act when they say they're afraid, especially when the danger comes from someone close. Her name is etched on a grave, but also in Canada's conscience. And for all of us watching, grieving, remembering, Carissa Bordeaux is more than a victim. She's a reminder to never let monsters hide behind smiles again.